with me today, John Peebles, who many of you guys I'm sure know. So John actually, it was this time in 2016, John actually had a fireside chat, way before my time. I'm not sure if you remember any questions from then.
Yeah, no, I think I was thinking back to that, and I had a plane to catch, and so it was kind of like, said some stuff and then said goodbye, and I felt very rude, so it's good to have another shot at it. I thought I'd never be invited back, so thanks.
Of course, great to have you, John. So I thought I'd start, if it's okay, I guess, even actually about your early days. So I know your background's potentially quite unique in terms of locations. So I know you spent a lot of time in China growing up, obviously America, university and early career, and then landed in Edinburgh. Was there a particular moment or even, get my words there, it's terrible. Yes, sorry. Was there a particular moment that kind of really got you inspired to get involved with entrepreneurship specifically? I know obviously you're more technology focused in your early days.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that comes up all the time, and I like to describe myself as an accidental entrepreneur. I never wanted to do this. I know that it all seems very glamorous to some people, but it was never, I never wanted to start my own business or whatever. I think what was maybe a little bit interesting is I grew up in China, and it was in 1984, my father had this stupid idea to move the family over to China, and we were one of 12 non-Chinese people in the entire province of Hunan, which, you know, was a bit unusual. And so through that, very early, I mean, you meet people today and they're like, oh yeah, I moved to China in the year 2000. I'm an old Chinese hand. And you're like, look, dude, we beat Coca-Cola to China. So we moved there, and that meant basically that, and my parents had this very, let's just say, Scottish attitude towards allowance, which meant they didn't give me much at all, right? And they were tight, I guess is what we would say here. And that meant if I wanted to buy anything or do anything, it didn't cost a whole lot to do stuff in China at the time, and there wasn't a whole lot to do. But if I wanted to do anything or buy anything, I had to find a way to earn money. And so I kind of started these little businesses to try to figure out, how could I achieve what I wanted to achieve? And I think it was through that process that it maybe removed the fear a little bit of saying, okay, I'm going to start this thing, and I got to do it in a controlled environment. At least I could, eat and have clothes and go to school and stuff if it didn't work out. And then it was through the period that I went to university in the States, or what we call college. It was 1999 when I entered university, and at that time, I don't know if you guys remember, but the Matrix was out in theaters. The new economy was in full swing, and there's 100% employment, and people were actually, for computer science students, they were actually being paid signing bonuses. So like we were NBA players or something. It was have a $15,000 signing bonus, or we'll pay off all your student loans, $40,000 if you come to work for us. And it was just this amazing time. You went in, you're like, oh, we're all gonna be in the Matrix, and it's just gonna be awesome. And then basically in 2003 was when I graduated. I was after the dot-com implosion, and everyone was saying, there will never be a single American programmer employed ever again, because they're all going to be offshore to India and China, and this is real. And Silicon Valley is over, and I think one graduate from my class had a job, and it was his father's company, and so you're kind of like sitting there and you're like, well, in the US, your student loans, which I had a lot of, started 6 months to the day after you graduate. It doesn't matter whether you have a job or not. And so all of that was like, well, called another unemployed friend, like, let's just start our own company and make some money here. And it kind of led on to that. So it was never like, oh, I want to do this. I want to raise money and do all this stuff that maybe nowadays kids are a little bit more educated, and they kind of think maybe that's something I like to do.
Absolutely, John. And I mean, that's a really interesting time actually to obviously be finished university. Do you think, and maybe it's more of an abstract question, but had it been a different situation where it was more prosperous with jobs and there's more opportunities, do you think you would have been maybe as tempted to start something?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's an alternate reality out there, which is I did an internship with a company that nobody had ever heard of in 2003 called Freddie Mac. And after 2006, everybody had heard of Freddie Mac, or 2008. But at the time, did a summer internship with them, and they said, look, I was on a team of like 5 or 6 people, and it was the typical, it's like, the first time I watched Office Space was that summer, and it was literally that, so with this team of 6, only 2 of the team did any work at all. I got, my assignment, and I did, at 9:30 my first day, and I do it, and I come back at like 11:30. I'm like, look, I'm really sorry that took so long, but I had to find the code, and my computer's new, and the environment, whatever, and the manager was just like, well, you could probably just go home now because that's all we had for you the whole summer. It's like, so it was through that, a very low bar, right? It was through that they actually offered me a job at the end of that internship and said, we'll pay $85,000 a year if you drop out of school and come to work with us in DC. And I was like, I was playing in this rock band. There's this girl that I thought was cute, and I thought maybe she might talk to me if I went back, and I said no, and that was an alternate reality, right? Which was I would still be working there to this day, having a nice life, but none of this entrepreneur shit. So who knows? Hopefully I chose right.
I'm sure it does. I mean, that's a really interesting one. Speaking about, I guess it speaks about risk. Where maybe it's a bit too binary to think of it as somebody going for a high-paying job where there's security, there's no potential, I guess, downside versus startups. What do you say to somebody who was your age now, not yours, sorry, your age when you were coming out of university, sorry, who is thinking about starting something, but obviously there is a risk attached to it? Would you say to actually go for it, or maybe actually
my biggest piece of advice, and I get asked quite a bit, and nobody ever takes this advice, is work at a startup first before you try to start your own thing. I think that's really critical, and work at a startup that is growing quickly. So work at a startup that is moving through different phases. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier.
Yes.
Or maybe it was somebody else, but they were saying, well, you've been at Administrate for 8 years. How's the last 7 or 8 years? And I said, well, it was mostly really shit. It was fucking terrible. And people were like, people are always like, what? And it's like, what I've learned since my 3rd or 4th startup is that actually I hate the early stage portion of the startup journey. And some people just love that. They love, we don't know what we're going to do, and we're searching for a product and product market fit, all this stuff. I hate that. And so by working at a startup, you get to learn on somebody else's dime, and you get to kind of see what doesn't work, and it's learning. It's compressing down and narrowing the the options, the option for failure, really. And you get to experience those different phases, and you get to figure out which one you like, because you may just be an early stage person, you may be a later stage person, or you could be both. You don't have to be one or the other, but that learning process, I think, is so important. That's what I got at my couple of companies, and I really think that has saved a lot of time and money and heartache. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, it's one thing that we spoke about, I think so, beforehand, which was, I guess, on that point of it, your early experience, which I guess on paper is maybe more tech focused, and how that's, I guess, kind of potentially, I guess, helped you now in your role as CEO. Would you say that that's quite a big shift, going from obviously a tech focus to somebody who's, I guess, more of a bird's eye view, or is it actually more crossover than people expect?
Well, so I wrote a blog post about 4 or 5 years ago that I refer people to a lot, which is, the title of it was, I've never wished I was less technical, right? And I think you always wish you were more technical. You always wish that you had a deeper understanding of whatever it is. And if you're gonna set out and get involved with a software company, if that's kind of what you're doing, like at Administrate, I think it's really, really important to either be deeply technical yourself, or have somebody that you can implicitly trust that is deeply technical, that has loads of success, that they've had a lot of reps behind them and so on, in terms of they've done this before, and I think, but I really, when I went to university, there's SAT at the time was math and verbal, right? And most people would say, oh, well, if you want to go to computer science, you need really high math scores, and the verbal, not so much. And there's a graph of our incoming class freshmen, and it was all these high scores, like way up here on the math section, and there was one that was way down here. And then on the verbal, it was all of these way down here, and there's one verbal that was way up here. And so I was the exact opposite of every incoming freshman, probably since as well. I loved computers, and I wasn't good at math. I had to work harder in those areas, but that discipline of learning how to solve problems and break things down and systems thinking and so on, anybody can do it if they apply themselves, and that's been a huge advantage to me. And I'm a bit haunted by some of the key moments in our thesis at Administrate and our strategy that could never really have happened unless I was at least being able to listen to what the technical folks were saying to us and make that a priority, that have now become competitive advantages for us and really become a differentiator for us today. So if you're not technical, sorry to demotivate you, but maybe sort that out, if you think about starting something.
Absolutely, John. And one thing you mentioned there, obviously, which I think is a bit of a cliche potentially, but it's obviously incredibly important, is solving a problem. So obviously with Administrate very much for teaching orientated. Would you say that, and correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, but the teaching connection with obviously your family, your mother and your father, I think you did a bit of teaching in China as well. I guess on the topic of solving a problem, do you think that's been something that's maybe essential actually, maybe from a product market fit point of view, for the customer?
Yeah, so we are now firmly in an enterprise B2B space, meaning our target is corporates that will spend at least $100,000 a year. So we're primarily targeted in North America. So at least $100,000 a year minimum spend, and it goes up from there. And often there are professional services projects that are integrating our platform into other pieces of their tech stack. And so the joke that we always, it's not actually a joke, the thing we always say internally is we're in the improv comedy business, right? And that is, we say yes, comma, and, right? So the customer says, can you build us an AI, talking horse? And we say yes. And it will cost you $10 trillion and take 200 years, right? And then they say, oh, maybe I don't want that. Okay, and so it's just that idea, and the key piece around that is that a lot, invariably, when customers are asking you for something, they have pre-filtered what the problem is, and so being able to actually peel back those layers and problem identification, I think, is the hard part. The solution is always easy. It's what is actually the real problem that we're trying to solve, and that's been a journey of how do you teach people to do that? How do you get your teams arrayed around that idea? How do you do the yes and without freaking out your own team and the customer at the same time? All of that. Yeah, it's a crucial skill that is rare, a lot more rare than we think.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And I guess bringing us onto team obviously is something which is absolutely essential in terms of managing and growing. And one thing I was really keen to ask you was your, ethos in terms of hiring. What do you really look for when you hire new teams? Obviously, it will depend per department, if it's more technical or maybe more customer facing, but do you have a few maybe criteria potentially that you look for?
Yeah, sure. It has changed and evolved over the years, but I think for us, we're really looking for smart people that get things done. Yeah, it's kind of the best way to sum it up. And there's of course some skills-based things, but we're looking for alignment around values in particular. And everybody uses the word company culture, and we do too. And I chafe that a little bit because we actually want to celebrate lots of cultures, but I don't really like. It just seems a bit weird to say our company culture. But anyway, values alignment is something that we really look for. We have a whole interview that's dedicated just to testing values alignment around things. And I think one crucial thing for us is that you're smart and you get things done, but you're also learning along the way, and learning means behavior modification. So I love it with our team. We tried to put in a culture of retrospectives, and I just got really pissed off about a year and a half ago, because I was like, we're having these retros, and I'm not seeing anything that we're changing as a result of these retros. And it's like, well, what is the fucking point of that? Like, you've got, learning means behavior modification. And the thing is, with a company like a startup, you're always changing, and you always have to be learning and modifying your behavior. And so we're looking for people that are values aligned, willing to learn, and that really is the hardest thing. And the skills-based stuff, you can learn anything if you've got the right attitude. Yeah.
Absolutely, John. And obviously, you mentioned culture there. What's your, I guess, kind of thinking on culture? It's something we hear a lot about, which I guess probably a good thing, but often, and maybe this is my own kind of personal bias, it's sometimes a bit cliche, potentially. What's your kind of thinking on it? Is it as important as people are starting to say nowadays, or is it still something that maybe not so much?
I think it's really important, and I think Administrate's been a good example of where it can go really well, and it's also been a good example of what happens when it doesn't go well or goes wrong. And I think the key thing is alignment, around this set of values, and we've written ours down, and we try to live them out. And where we've gotten it wrong in the past has been, we don't have alignment, or we don't know what alignment looks like. And so one of the contributing factors to some of this friction over the last few years is we're operating in 3 different geographies. We've got a U.S. team, we've got a team here in the UK, and there's kind of really a couple of cultures within the UK-based team. So we have more of a maybe continental outlook. We've got a British outlook, right? And then we've got a Middle Eastern team. And so everybody, when you say we want to be a transparent company, everybody is interpreting that through the lens of their own dominant culture. And we say, oh yeah, we agree. We should all be transparent. Mm-hmm. And I'll be like, what do you think about this? And everybody will be like, oh, it's okay, right? And then somebody will be like, that's fucking shit, and you're like, people are like, oh, I can't believe they said this. So all of that has caused some challenges for us that we've had to face up to. But that alignment is so important, because when you're moving quickly and when you're growing fast, things are breaking all around. It's not the most enjoyable experience all the time, but it at least lets you set the framework for how you're going to solve a problem, maybe between us, maybe between us and the customer, that type of thing. So,
absolutely. And one thing I know I mentioned to you before as well, so I'm sure you hear every interview, but obviously the 4 hour, so impressed with 4-day work week rather. Is there a particular story behind it for you especially? And
yeah, I mean, this gets fixated on a lot, and everybody thinks it's a lie, right?
Yeah.
I cannot tell you. I will get it at least once tonight, right?
Okay.
So somebody in this audience will walk and be like, "You don't actually do a 4-day work week, right?" Yeah. But the short answer is, in general, 98+% of the time, the answer is yes. The genesis of that, though, and why we don't like talking about it as much as is we view it as a downstream thing. And so really, when we talk about what we're trying to do at Administrate, you say, there's 2 things that we're trying to solve, 2 problems. The first is we want to be infrastructure for education, right? So corporates, we want to be their infrastructure for training their teams, for partners, whatever. And that all makes sense. We've all used some learning product, and it's probably terrible, but we're trying to solve that. And that's problem number 1. And then problem number 2 is that we are trying to demonstrate that if you put things like your company culture, if you put people first, if you focus on some of these things that we all say, we all say that people are our most important asset. We all say we should know that great companies take a minimum of 10 years, but probably more like 20 to build. And if we know that those things are true, then we should probably not act like we normally do in startup land. And so our thesis is, the second piece of it is, can we focus on building what we call the ultimate human organization, right? Which is unfortunately, hashtag uh-oh, right? But this idea of, and people are always like, oh, it's so American, and it is. It's aspirational, right? Like, it's this idea of, can we focus on what does the ultimate human organization actually look like in terms of putting people first, caring about well-being, taking a long-term view. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And if we do focus on that first and foremost, outcome of the other thing will be greater than if we had ignored that to begin with. And so that's kind of the second thing that we're trying to prove at Administrate. And so the 4-day work week is just one of those things where, I'm a workaholic, and we've hired a lot of workaholics at Administrate. And the problem is that, a lot of people who are high performers love to work, right? And they love what they do. And so it's not the Disney movie where you're just disappointing the kid on Christmas Eve or whatever. It's not that. That's too cliche. It's just, you love to work, you love being successful, you love to be a master of your craft, and so you let it just consume you. And so how can we inoculate against those tendencies was kind of a genesis of the 4-day work week. It was also the idea of, what if we could write our own ticket, and how would we? And I thought, I don't want to retire, but I wouldn't mind working 4 days a week, and that might be good. And so then that morphed into what is this value of sustainability? How does that morph into other things? And so then that was like, okay, well, we've solved maybe the working hours problem, but we have 100 people now in the company across 3 geographies. At any given point with a human group of that size, there's at least 4, 5, 6, 10 people going through some really awful shit. And how do we solve that problem? How do we help them? How do we be human about that? And so it's just kind of morphed into other things that we've done over the last few years to try to work that problem. I rambled a lot there, so.
He does. You touched on, I guess, in a way, coming into mental health, well-being. I know it's something that you speak about a lot. One thing I was really keen to ask you, I'd almost kind of used, a new decade as a way to have a bit of structure of the time. Obviously, the end of the 2010s, which feels a bit weird saying that now, but the end of 2010s, we've really seen a peak in terms of interest with mental health, which is great. Do you think we're doing enough, or do you think this is another buzzword for many people, and the actual real work is not being done there?
I mean, I feel ill-equipped to maybe talk about society in general, except to say no, we're not doing enough.
Of course, of course.
At Administrate, it's very interesting timing actually. So back in 2016, the first time that I did this event, it was actually a really bad time for me personally, and it was a really bad time for Administrate, the company. It was this crazy thing where in 2015 we started having success, and we were generating lots of interest from our market, and it was starting to work. And at the time we were about 20-25 folks, and then we doubled about 45, and so we had a lot of growth. We had a lot of demand pull from our market, which is a great problem to have. We had huge amounts of tech debt that we had inherited. So our product originated as an internal tool within a company that spun it out to market. And so you know how that goes with the tech. It was just awful tech. And so we had done a lot of work on a rebuild that we launched in July, August of that year. And that did not go well. And so basically, and my personal life was not going well. I separated from my partner in the third quarter of that year. And then what happened was we raised some money, and based on the traction that we were getting, we started getting a lot of press, and it was like the local press in particular went wild, and in January of 2016, I remember this, like the bottom was falling out with our product, our bug counts had skyrocketed, our team was just getting crushed, like nothing was going right. It was just total disaster. We just closed a funding round. It was like total, the bottom was falling out everywhere. And I remember in January that year, there was, I think it was like every week there was some article that was written, and we weren't doing any PR. Some article was written about how Administrate was like the next best, the greatest thing. And there was one week in particular where every day of the week, a different newspaper ran a story about us. And I'm like, so I'm sitting there, and then it's like I come to an event like this, and the reason I had to fly to London was because we've been shortlisted as some huge nationwide UK thing of all the best startups in the history of the UK, all this shit, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like talking about how great we are, and people are asking like, oh, isn't it amazing? You've had so much success, and you're like, it felt very, very dishonest in terms of you knew the team was struggling, and you knew things weren't going well, you knew customers were not being well served and all that, and that was a very, very difficult time frame. It was at that point that I started. I was just like, man, we're at the end of the line here. We gotta figure out something. And for when your personal life doesn't go well, that sucks. When your professional life doesn't go well, that sucks. When they don't go well at the same time together, that really sucks. And so thought, well, I've never tried therapy, but I'm going to try it. And I went to a therapist, and it was really intimidating at first, but it started to help, and things do get better, and life does improve, and you meet other people, and the business gets together, and so on, and it was through that I was like, wow, that really helped. Well, and then why don't we try to offer this for our team? And so we did, and so starting then, we basically offer, it's a completely confidential thing, but we've got a therapist that comes into our office, and it's about a day, I think it's about a day a week right now, maybe two, and it's completely, we don't know who goes, we only know like if the slots are full or not, and she's fully licensed, and it's just a thing, and the idea is to reduce that inertia and that friction. And what we try to say is like, look, to each person that joins our team, just go to one session. And first it was a suggestion, now we require it, that you have to go, once you're hired to administrate, to one session with this therapist just to see what it's like. Because despite me talking about this in front of tons of people, and we talk about it about once a month, that this thing exists at the company, people still within the company wait until they're about to die, like physically die, before like, maybe you should think about it. And then they go and they're like, oh wow, that really helped, and you're like, okay, so if we've created the safest possible thing where everybody's talking about it, and yet there are still people that are not actually, it's a Celtic problem as well, big time, and I totally get that, but if that's the case, then extrapolate that out to people that don't have those opportunities, and it's bad, so no, not doing enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one thing I was keen to follow up with that on was, I mentioned this again to you before when you I think did a blog post about it. It was one of the panels, the WFIO.
Oh yeah.
Not to obviously bring things down back to disaster and that nature, but if you had any maybe words of advice, or is there anything that you go to in terms of maybe a habit or something you can do if those moments ever occur, which I'm sure are rare, and just for context for people who haven't heard the acronym, what is the acronym?
Yes.
How do you introduce it?
So this is a fascination I developed over the last. So it's kind of through this process, because I was like, wow, Administrate shit, and I'm definitely a shit CEO, and but Skyscanner, they're perfect, right? And everything's going perfect at Free Agent, and and so on, and then you get to meet these people, and so then I didn't coin this term, but maybe I've popularized it in Scotland, which is the Withio moment, which is the we're fucked, it's over, right? WFIO. And I developed this fascination, like asking other founders and CEOs, like, when was your last Withio moment, or how many of those have you had? And I mean, you wouldn't believe just how common they are.
Yeah.
Everyone has had them, and I think there's no exceptions to that rule, and that includes companies like Zoom, Skyscanner, Free Agent, any one you can think of, and I think at Administrate we've had at least 5 or 6 times where I'm genuinely like, we're fucked, it's over, right? We're not getting out of this one. And then it was all right, at the end of it. So, your question of how do you deal with that? I think, I know now how not to deal with that, right? Alcohol is a very tempting option as you reach for your last one. And I've done that, losing your temper, internalizing, all of that, right? I've done all the negative stuff, but I think one of the things for me that's been really a revelation has been we about 3-4 years ago, right around 2015 when things were not going well for us, we added Ed Molyneux to our board of directors. He's the CEO of Free Agent, and he just it's interesting because he was just completely unconcerned about most of the I remember calling him a couple of times, and I'm like, man, we are so screwed. This has happened. He'd be like, well, that's gonna be fine. You'll figure it out. And I'd be like, Ed, it was almost like, well, is this a British American thing? Just he's not engaging with this, or what? This is very unhelpful. Just telling me it's gonna be okay. The thing was, though, he was right, and then what was then interesting is I got the opportunity to help out on the board of another earlier stage company here in Edinburgh, Snap 40 is now Current Health, and at least 8-9 times I was called and it's like, we're fucked, it's over, and I was like, you know what, you're just gonna solve this problem. It'll be fine, right? And then it's like you're listening to yourself say this on the phone, and actually it's like, oh, the shit from China was 1 micron to the left and it should have been to the right, and I'm like, so you're just gonna fly to China and tell them to put it to the right? And it's like, oh, and then literally 3 days later, oh, we solved it, it's okay, and I think that's just by having just that one layer of indirection back, you really are. It's just helpful, and I think it is difficult as a founder or a CEO or somebody in leadership if you don't have that peer group, whether it's a person on your board or whatever that has been just a little bit farther along on the journey and is living that life, at the same time as you. It's very difficult because what happens is you come home and you say, oh, the shit was 1 micron to the left, and your partner goes, well, you'll figure it out, right? And then you go, you have no idea what it's like, right? And all this stuff, right? And you're basically just a total asshole. At least I was. And the thing is, you're right. They don't know what it's like, but they're right? They're ultimately right. And I think that's just that thing. And then as time goes on, the spacing of these things goes over. And it's like reminds me of I get asked this all the time. When did you know it was going to be successful? And I was like, well, about it's like the Dread Pirate Roberts thing, right? About last year, for the first time, I was like, yeah, we probably won't just die tomorrow, and that's we're 8 years in, and so these things take time, and it's that long-term view, and you've got to set yourself up to get through all that stuff. Otherwise, you're just gonna die, or you'll ruin so many lives. You don't want a body count that just stretches out behind you.
No, definitely not. No. Good for anyone. I guess one thing I meant to ask you early on was about funding, actually. So I guess maybe that's a nice way to come back to that. I like what you're saying, obviously, long-term view. What's your, philosophy on funding? Because I remember Mike was sat almost in that position where you were, Mike Groves, a couple of months ago, and he's obviously a big advocate for bootstrapping. as a specific example, but we can ask you just open-ended as possible. What's your ethos on funding?
So Mike's a lot smarter than me. So take his advice, I would say. But I think that you tend to find characters that are on either end of the spectrum, right? So there's the folks that say, you go out and raise tons of money and you go for it and you fail fast, and fine, there's plenty of examples where that's been successful. And then there's other folks on the complete opposite end that never raise a single penny, max out your credit cards if you have to, all this stuff. And I think that those are both completely valid points with plenty of examples behind them. The thing that I tend to counsel as much aggressively as I can to entrepreneurs anywhere that I talk to, and something that I think I was really fortunate to learn somehow, like I just realized this or something one day, is that the most important thing about raising money is that you need to match the capital that you're raising with the stage and the ambition of what you're trying to do at that time. And what you find, the horror stories are always in the misalignment of those things. It's not that VCs are evil, and it's not that angels are good or private equity is this or whatever, but you really need to understand what are the drivers behind various forms of capital, and there's a lot, right? There is a capital structure out there that will work for you depending on your stage, but you should not be doing crowdfunding to scale up a unicorn, when you've got product market fit, right? And you should not be doing VC funding when you have yet to penetrate your market and prove out a repeatable sales process, right? And also the risk tolerance that's involved is, you need to understand that. Just things like if you raise from private equity, they will not tolerate losing their money, right? So they will not lose their money. One of the best examples of that ever, I think, is when you look at the FanDuel situation. They fundamentally mispriced their risk, right? They raised a huge amount of money from private equity groups that would not refuse to lose money, and they thought they were through that risk gate, and they weren't. And so then when they hit the bumps, right, and all of a sudden it's like, well, is it going to be legalized? Is it not? We're in court cases, whatever. That impedance there was what caused everything to go sour. And so had they raised from VC, then they're like, well, sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some. Then that risk posture was more appropriate. So, again, it's so easy to shit on people that aren't in the room and, whatever. But like that is the fundamental thing, is raise the right capital for the right stage at the right risk profile for you and your business, and then you at least got a shot at it. I think the other thing is that people fundamentally misunderstand how risky this is. There is nothing in your life that is as risky as starting a high-tech startup or a high-growth startup. Literally nothing. Like we're all worried about the coronavirus right now. That's an inverse risk relationship to what a startup is. It's just are you getting this vehicle that's got a 99% chance of failure, right, within the next 18 months? No, we're not going to do that, and yet we do that happily, and it's very strange, but that's humans for you. We always misprice risk. So
absolutely. So final question to ask you would be, looking ahead, so it's a new decade, start of the year, what's next for Administrate, and actually what's next for you actually as well, looking ahead?
Well, it's funny because at Administrate, it's kind of like we've talked about this a lot internally. We're just now getting to the starting line for us, and that's simultaneously weird to say and also very exciting. We spent the last 3 years, really since 2016, completely rebooting our market, our approach to it, our offering, our pricing, all of that changed. And we've now got some proof points that that's working. And so it's kind of like, well, we're finally to the point where we can run a little bit. And it's very, very exciting, and it's very, very gratifying to see that work pay off that the team has put in. And a lot of people had a lot of faith in kind of what we were setting out to do. So I think for the next kind of few years here, it's going to be, all right, we now know we've kept it between the ditches, which is how my grandfather taught me how to drive when I was 11. It's very odd, actually. Let me drive his pickup when I was 11. We kept it between the ditches, and now it's like, how do we refine that and perfect it and go for it? Because we've got a wide open market, and the next 5-10 years should be really, really interesting. So I think on the one hand, on the other hand, it's like there's this assessment that a therapist does whenever you come in. I think it's like a score of like 1 to 25, right? And there's all these questions, and the one that you always watch out for is have you decided to kill yourself, right? So it's a scale of 1 to 5. But I think when I came in around this time, 4 years ago, I was at a 23 out of 25, which is real bad in terms of like your mental health and so on. And now, I'm kind of at a 2 or 3. And that's not just therapy. That's not just the business doing better. That's not just personal life doing better. But it is kind of a combination of all that, and at least just paying a little bit of attention to that. And we've seen that not just with myself personally, but also with many members of our team. And that's been a real meaningful thing that I think we're not perfect, right? So we make loads of mistakes in Administrate, and we're not for everybody and all that. But I think it's just being able to, it feels a little bit like the starting point in that respect as well. Like, what could the next 10 years look like when you're not struggling with ignoring your mental health? Like, whoever thought about that? And what could that look like? So I'm excited about that on that level. So
fantastic. No, it's a really nice point to end on, John. I guess it was part of a journey, to an extent of 2016 that started going, 2020 now. So we can a positive note to finish on in terms of my questions. Obviously, as normal, guys, the floor is open. Who wants to ask the first question? Selby, up to you. Go for it.
Sorry, my name is Selby Carey. I run a robotics startup in Edinburgh called Flavour Robotics. We used to be called Castor Space Technologies. So my question is on how you built up the founding team for Administrate. One thing that we've got a lot of feedback from potential investors is that we're missing a critical component in our team, which at the time wasn't critical, but now it's critical. Is that we don't really have that software component. We've got the sort of sales and the commercial partnerships, we've got the hardware engineering, and now we're missing the software. But that only kind of happened 2 years into the journey when we needed it. So how did you choose your founding team, and how would you use the experience you've had over, I think it was 3 or 4 startups you said? How have you molded your experience in choosing that founding team to suit what could be potentially the growth trajectory that your business is going through? Because that's been something that we've thought about a lot now. Yeah,
I mean, it's a really tough problem, and I don't think there's not an easy answer, unfortunately. But I think for me, that's the other reason why I tend to counsel people to work somewhere else before they start their own thing, because you get to know more people, and you get to see what works and what doesn't, and who's good and who's not, and so on. And you can kind of start the recruitment drive, if you will, early on. And I think that's where, for me, when you look at our executive team, one of them is the guy I was roommates with in college. Okay, so that was a long recruitment process. The one was a guy that I worked with for 7 or 8 years at my previous company in the States, and then let's see, 3 on our executive team were folks that I just happenstance to meet in Edinburgh, and so that does happen. You meet great people, and then one was a referral from Ed at Free Agent. We share the same CFO, and so I think it's just that thing where, and I think that ratio holds forth, but hopefully as you move on through your career and through your life, you're developing this Rolodex of people that you want to work with, that you know are excellent, that want to work with you, because it's not always bi-directional. And that is probably the best way to find people that can be on your team. But you always will find great people. It's just very difficult, and if you get it wrong, it's really expensive. I mean, we've gotten it wrong a few times at Administrate. It's not because they were shit and we're so great, whatever. It's got to be right both ways. But that each one of those mistakes is £2 million incinerated, right? And well, that sucks. So I would say just you really got to think through, like, okay, what are the pieces in the board that I need, and then always be recruiting and always go to events like this, meet people. I mean, when I joined Administrate, we're the spin out. The CEO had just left, the guy who helped spin it out, and it was like we were like the sick chicken of Edinburgh. We're just like walking around with like this dead animal. And I made it a priority to go to literally every event that moved. Because I was just like, we got to show up, we got to be somewhat reasonable, we got to meet people, and just fly the flag, and then people started falling out of the woodwork, and so on, and it's that long-term view. You are not selling just Declan over here to come work for Administrate. You're selling Declan, his spouse or partner, their kids, family, whatever. It's all of that, and it's got to last. Otherwise, it's just going to be very difficult.
Fantastic. Great question to start. Who's next, guys? It's really good one. All right, Deck, you'll go first, and then should we set up after?
So one of the things that you mentioned that I'm a huge fan of, masters of their own craft. Okay, just that saying, I'm a huge fan of that. So what systems have you created, or what resources have you provided, what activities that you have put in place to ensure that your employees achieve that level of success, both personally, professionally, and eventually become masters of their own craft?
It's a great question. I think this one is a real struggle, and in many ways, and it's not just the way, like, nobody sits here and says, I don't want to be a master of my craft, right? It's like everybody thinks they're a good driver, and nobody wants to be labeled a bad driver, and I think, but the fundamental truth is that, I remember when I was like 16 or something, I was in China, and I was like ultra hard right, conservative, an Ayn Rand fanboy, and I met some British guy, and he was talking about this thing called socialized medicine, right? And I sat there and I pipe up, and I'm 16. I'm like, the basic tenet of socialism, the fundamental tenet is that people are stupid, right? And the thing that I've learned is that is true, and people are stupid, right? And like, we're just not going to save enough money for retirement, and we know this is true, and so you need a safety net. Otherwise, we're all going to die penniless, And so it doesn't have to be pejorative. It's just that's human nature, and so it's this thing where, like, right, you master your craft. Nobody says they don't want to do that, but nobody actually puts in the time or effort to do it. And so, what the struggle for us at Administrate is that we harp on this quite a lot. But the biggest thing that we've done is we've implemented a thing where every single employee at Administrate has to have a personal development plan that's written up, that they come up with and say, I'm working on these things and so on, and this is how it's gonna lay out. And it can be whatever, and it doesn't have to be necessarily work related. It can be whatever. And the second thing is we harp all the time on the fact that the company is growing fast. I mean, we're growing. We grew 60% year on year last year. We thought that was terrible. Like, we should be well over 100 this year, and that's at scale. And so if that is true, and the numbers are there, and everybody has access to them, well, that means that the company is going to be twice as big, and twice as complex and all that in 12 months' time. Are you ready for that as an individual? And so you kind of the benchmark that I always use with founders is I'm like, you need to be reading about a book a week, about 50 books a year. And most founders are like, what? But I had to do that. Like, okay, I had all the computer science knowledge and I thought I was hot shit on that stuff. But I had no accounting knowledge and I had no idea how to raise capital and I had no idea how to, and I had to read all of these things. And so just setting that expectation that it requires discipline and investment and learning does not mean a blog post and learning does not mean a podcast. It means actual application and behavior modification and discipline and diligence and setting that expectation and then working with our managers to see people follow through that is one of the ways that we try to do that. And we don't have it perfect. We don't have it even probably good, but then every week we have it's a tool called 15.5, which is really great at scale, and it there's a million of these, but it just emails out. The idea is it takes 15 minutes for the employee to complete and 5 minutes for the manager to read and reflect back on. It's like, what did you accomplish today and whatever? What have you done this week to further your PDV plan, or what have you learned this week, and so on. And that's another way we try to reinforce that. But it's a process. But just setting the expectation, I think, really helps.
How do you ensure that scales?
Well, that's one of the things that our learning infrastructure is attempting to solve. Is how do you sell this at 100,000 employees, let alone 100? And so we're starting to roll out our own tool internally, and that's been good. But I think a lot of it is just setting that expectation and having it layer down through the whole. So things like book clubs. We do learn one, teach one. We do lunch, bring your own lunch, all this stuff, and then that type of stuff boils down eventually into the annual review. And the idea is, your compensation is in some part dependent on how much you accomplished on your PDP.
Fantastic. So, can I answer your question as well?
We're recruiting developers at the moment. What's your experience with recruiting developers? And just help, please.
Yeah. I don't know if I've got a whole lot of good news for you. We thought that the 4-day work week would be this incredible advantage, like indomitable thing, and it hasn't really been. It's just it's interesting. I'd say people like it, but it hasn't. We don't have a horde of people beating down the doors to work for us. We used to pay under market, and that was a challenge. We're probably at market now. We're not paying anywhere near the top of the market. But what we found, we found two challenges with recruitment in Edinburgh specifically. The first is that it is a very small town. There's only 500,000 people here, and we've been a victim of our own success talking about how great Edinburgh is for startups, because there's just not enough engineers, and people from Glasgow don't travel to Edinburgh, and even if they say they will, they'll burn out after 6 months on the train, and so it's not really a viable solution. And so what we've done is we've leveraged the fact that we have a Middle East office heavily in this regard. It was supposed to originally be a commercial office, and it's turned into basically a place where we can hire really great engineers with zero competition, and it's a city of 1.5 million, and so that's been a huge advantage for us. So I think you need to look beyond Edinburgh. You got to embrace remote working, which I think is great for everybody, and Edinburgh is just too small to supply enough engineers. And then that quickly leads into a political discussion, which is, what a great time to be clamping on immigration, right when we're like literally dying for talent. So, but we can set that one aside. And the second thing that we've observed is, of three, so I lied, there's two, and I'll shut up, is that a big challenge with engineering talent in Edinburgh is most people, 90% of engineers, have never worked at a product company before. And that is a huge problem for our ecosystem. It is I'm sorry, but like I worked at a consultancy and built that up and so on, but it is different working for a product company, and you find that every engineering team in the city is like reinventing the wheel like 400 times over badly, and you just don't have the 4 generations of engineering talent that know what a Scrum meeting is and know how to do a stand-up and know what continuous integration is and know what unit tests look like, and it just all of that institutional knowledge does not exist in the UK or Europe in general. So, and then the third thing that we've observed, if you think it's hard hiring engineers, wait till you actually have to hire like marketers or salespeople or account manager, anything like it. It is even worse. So, sorry, but now we've all been demotivated. Let's go drink. go to therapy. Yeah. It's a hard problem. It's a hard problem. You just go. Yeah, it's a huge challenge.
How have you found the remote working?
I mean, we cheat, right? So we have 2 offices, and so you're always remote, and all of our teams are spread across those geographies. So we're already set up where even if you're in an office, you're remote, and so adding remote working was easy. In my previous company, we were started in South Florida, which is literally the worst possible place to start a tech startup in the entire world, probably. It was like metro area, 5 million people, and they graduated about 50 computer science graduates each year. So it's just dismal, which meant that 90% of our team was remote. And I think, that for engineering, that works really well. And it's better because every study that's ever been done has shown that open plan offices are just dog shit. And yet we all put everybody in an open plan office, and you should read Peopleware if you're out and you're skeptical about that. So the fact that you can actually get everybody their own office called their home, and they can work from there, means that they're way more productive. And so I think there's only good things about it. Now with stuff like Zoom and video calling, all the stuff we didn't have, it's made it way better. Yeah.
Thank you, John, for coming down and taking your time over busy January periods to share your stories, your expertise and everything. So I think that's at least worth a very decent round of applause from everyone.